Good evening, everyone, and welcome to VOICES RandomISH. I'm your host, Eldridge Alexander, and tonight I'm flanked by my two sisters, Bess and Allison. Our sister Dartani is living her best life in the Dominican Republic, but she says, hey! So tonight we're wrapping up what has been a busy month for exploring and promoting awareness of breast cancer, specifically men and men of color, as well as the impact of domestic violence and abuse on everyone, including men. Those have been the focus of our discussions this month. And some of our courageous viewers share some of the stories of resilience as it relates to breast cancer. You remember Dar was telling us that someone that she knew shared. And because November is Men's Health Month, we're going to be sharing those stories with you each Tuesday during our 8 o'clock broadcast, because we think it's really important to hear from our viewers as to experiences they may have had around breast cancer. And then we'll even get into things about prostate cancer next month, because it's November. A couple other things I just want to bring up before we get into our discussion. I'm going to share some statistics, like I said, on prostate cancer and the screening techniques that are used, and some practices that might save your lives, especially, again, for our men of color, the ones African Americans, Hispanic, Haitian, what have you. But tonight, let's just do a little reflection here and focus on what we learned about breast cancer as well as domestic violence and abuse. So first of all, the statistics, I'm just going to review those real quick, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bess, and she's going to share some other things with you. So right now, we know that breast cancer strikes 2,670 men each year. Out of that number, approximately 500 are going to die from the disease. 2.9 of every 100,000 men of color are going to be impacted. 1.7 to 1.9 of every 100,000 Caucasian men will be impacted. While female breast cancer is very common, it happens in 1 in 8 women. And male breast cancer, of course, we know is extremely rare, where we have about 2,000 to 3,000 cases a year in the United States, even though it is rare. That's a high number if you think about it. And the reason for that is because, I don't know if you guys knew this, but I was shocked by the statistic that 1 in 4 people carry that BRCA gene, that BRCA 1 and 2 gene that you were talking to.
Yeah, because that makes them more likely to develop cancer.
Yeah, and so talking about the screening, you know, that they said that these men with these BRCA or BRCA2 mutations have a particular increased risk of both male breast cancer and prostate cancer, as well as pancreatic cancer and melanoma. So you know, next month when we talk to the men in November, we definitely have to talk on the needs of this.
I wonder if do they know this before? Do they know, whether they have this BRCA gene?
Well, the thing is that I'm glad you asked the question, Bess, because most of us don't. And like, have you ever gone to the doctor and they asked you, did you want to do that genetic testing?
Yeah.
And what was your response?
Nope.
And what was the reason?
Because you ain't gonna get my DNA. Just kidding. Because I didn't know enough about it. It's like, what was the reason that I'm doing this for? I didn't know enough about it.
Right. So are you saying that if you had more knowledge of what the genetic testing and the whys behind it, you might be something that you would engage in?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What about you? Have you ever heard about the BRCA testing?
No, I've not done the BRCA testing, like the genetic testing. I have done the DNA testing to trace my ancestry.
Okay, that's a little bit different testing. What I'm talking about is the testing,
right, to find your
cancer,
that I have.
What you're predisposed with. And one of the key figures that we can to bring this home so that people really understand the testing we're talking about, for those of you who may be saying, what the heck are they talking about? When Angelina Jolie discovered that she had that BRCA2 gene, she went in and had the double mastectomy because she knew she was at a higher risk for breast cancer. So I think that for me, what I'm thinking is one of the reasons people don't go in is because they really don't want to know. And I'm gonna tell you, that was my own personal perspective. I want to know.
Yeah.
So I'm saying to our viewers, don't be like me. Go in and at least have the screening. Yeah, I do my mammograms like I'm supposed to and all the other testing. So go in and get your, do your self-exams and things like that by no means, because again, 1 in 8 women is going to be stricken with breast cancer. And even though it's rare for men to have it, 2,000 to 3,000 cases of breast cancer a year in men is just 2,000 to 3,000. Too many, especially when men can do the same things that we can do. Perhaps women can show their husbands how to do breast exam. I think that could be fun.
I'll do you, you do me.
Okay, reciprocity, right. See, it's fun. Everything don't have to be doom and gloom, right? You can do that. All right, so the call to action is just like what I was saying. don't be embarrassed about doing a breast exam to get us for a fucking partner.
Right.
Because a few moments of discomfort are going to ensure years of life comfort. You need to be comfortable with practitioners. This lady was telling me that the reason why she liked her doctor.
Mm.
She said the doctor made her feel some kind of way when she went in her first visit. She was really young, and it was for it's birth control or what have you. And
so like a violated kind of thing.
Kind of like they talk down to her. I know
Yes.
exactly what you mean. Like I've had doctors where like they speak to you like you're less than, like, because of either what you're going there for, because of your age or whatever.
Yeah.
So in which case, find a new doctor, because you should always feel comfortable with your doctor. I've gone to see a doctor one time and never went back because I didn't like the demeanor, the attitude, the way I was spoken to. Not necessarily that they were rude.
Right.
We just didn't mesh, and that's not somebody I feel comfortable talking to. So you always got to make sure you feel comfortable with your healthcare provider, and if you don't, find a new one.
Yeah. I remember feeling uncomfortable. I was probably about 21, and I had just gotten married for the first time, and obviously I don't want no kids. I'm not in no 20, no, hell no. So that I don't know people. That ain't me. So I went to where I was working at the clinic, basically a really nice upscale clinic, full insurance and everything. That wasn't the issue. But when I went down and told him that I did not want to have kids, this man made me feel like I was, like you said, less than. I felt so horrible that I couldn't even open up about the other questions that I had. So I think that we do have to feel comfortable with the practitioners, and if you can't talk to your doctor, you have to be able to talk to a nurse or a friend or somebody, because otherwise, what do you think we do?
Just keep it to ourselves.
Exactly, and then you never get treated.
Mine's is, I don't like that. I've had a doctor that undermined whatever I was feeling or whatever symptoms I was having. Like, oh, my chest hurt. Well, can you breathe? Is it a 1 to a 10? I hate that question. Is it 1 to a 10? Well, it hurts, so it's a 10 to me.
Right.
They're like, no, a 10 is can't breathe, let the pass. I'm almost there.
Trying to be dead in your office.
Right. Basically, for you to help me, or they send you home and, oh, no, it's just nothing. So I just hate being undermined, or whatever's going on with me being undermined just because they have more of a educational background about medical diagnosis or whatever.
But you know your own body, and I think that the message we're trying to convey is that, one, we can't ignore, because what's going to happen. And while I may not want to have all the genetic information, I do want to feel comfortable that I can go in, like you said, and say, I have this pain that I've never felt. And it happens when I breathe. And for them not to make the joke, it was a joke a long time ago. Doctor, it hurts when I shake this. Well, then don't shake that.
Right.
It hurts when I breathe. Well, then don't breathe.
Right.
That's what they said. Don't breathe. So that was where I was coming from.
Sounds like a mom answer. It hurts when I do this. Well, don't do that then.
Right. And then what happens is when mom's not looking, you do something else. So like with the doctors, then you go home and you self-medicate. Or you avoid the situation all the way. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna turn this over to Bess. We're gonna switch the topic here, but we do have a call to action. One, we encourage you not to be embarrassed if you are having any type of symptoms in your breast area, whether it's a man or a woman. Do the self-exams. Have your partner do the self-exam. Ask a family friend if you're your sister or whatever. If you feel something, sometimes it's good just to say, hey, I think I feel something here. And even if it's nothing, it's nothing. But if it's something, then you have some support. Again, a few moments of discomfort may ensure life with comfort. You need to be comfortable with your practitioners, especially your doctor. And again, if you're not comfortable with your practitioner, please reach out to a friend, family member, or anyone else that you trust for support and reference. And now what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears here and talk about domestic violence and abuse. We are going to talk about it from some additional research that we were doing and look at it and invite you to engage with us as we share with you from a different perspective. What I read today in an article, and I can get the citations and post them online, is that lesbian and gay domestic violence has shattered the illusion that gays and lesbians are less than less violent than their heterosexual counterparts. Because remember, we were talking about the Purple Porch Project and how domestic violence and abuse is not a male or female issue, it's a social issue.
Right.
So this is why I really said that we should get into this just a little bit more to close out the month, because there's some other information that you guys wanted to share. And it says, the reality is that domestic violence occurs at approximately the same rate in gay and lesbian couples as it does in heterosexual unions. And remember, we had said last week that somehow or another, when a homosexual relationship or same-sex relationship takes on the persona of a heterosexual relationship. Somehow violence is embedded in that, and that kind of disturbs me. But they said that because the majority of domestic violence awareness movement is focused on heterosexual relationships, members of the LGBTQ community have been largely left out of the movement. And however, recent research shows that LGBTQ members fall victim to domestic violence at equal or even higher rates compared to their heterosexual counterparts. And they said there's similarities that exist, but the difference between same-sex battering and heterosexual battering are the reason this controversial topic has taken so long to address in both the gay and lesbian community and in the battered women's movement. Because remember, we talked about how they said the research was afraid that if we addressed it from the male perspective and or same-sex, that money will be taken away from women and children. And again, we said, no, it's a social problem. We need to look at it from everybody. So here's where we go. New theories of violence and models for intervention, they say, must be developed if same-sex domestic violence is to be confronted. So now I'm going to turn it over to Beth so she can explain why. She shares 9 quick statistics about domestic violence and the LGBTQ community. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, no problem. So we always hear about statistics with a man or a woman, a heterosexual relationship. You always hear about domestic violence, but I think one of the things that's not really talked about is domestic violence in a same-sex relationship, because some people don't believe that it exists. But we have some interesting statistics here. So 43.8% of lesbian women and 61.1% of bisexual women have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner at some point in their lifetime, as opposed to only 35% of heterosexual women.
That's a lot. That's a lot, because that's almost double what heterosexual women and a third more than lesbian women are experiencing.
Yeah, bisexual women are double. I know, I'm looking at that.
Just about.
Yes. And the next statistic is 26% of gay men and 37.3% of bisexual men have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner. And that's in comparison to a 29% of heterosexual men. So for gay men, it's less, but for bisexual men, it's more.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was reading when I was reading this article all the way through that was disturbing, it was saying that the things that they do was basically to humiliate the person, because a lot of these men that are bisexual, their female partners don't know that they're bisexual, so there was this fear of outing them that they were under. So a lot of that stalking and coercion was occurring.
Yeah,
so
definitely. Next statistic, in a study of males' same-sex relationships, only 26% of men called the police for assistance after experiencing near lethal violence. That's almost death violence.
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting, because only 26% of same-sex men report their abuse to police officers, and I wonder why. I almost would say that maybe they're afraid that they either won't be believed, or because people look at men, oh, a man can't abuse another man, that can't be counted as abuse. But as you said, same-sex relationships still take on that characteristic of the dominant one and the less dominant one, or the one that's being dominated. They still take on those same characteristics. So I think that's an interesting statistic.
And you know what's even deep about that is I might even dig into this a little bit more, because when I was studying heterosexuality, just kind of looking at the evolution of the word and finding out that, you know, we get into that a whole other time, but it almost wants you to study what the ideology of marriage is, the institution of marriage, or the institution of partnerships, you know, in Western culture. Because I mean, are you feeling what I'm feeling? Because they're not believing that it could happen. You know, that's the first thing. And that one man can't abuse another man, because now you're talking about physical power or ideologies about physical power. But for me, it almost seems like there's something embedded in the institution of relationships, that somebody has got to push somebody down in order for the person to rise up, and they do it in some these humiliating way. I don't know. What do you think?
I think I mean, if you look at marriage as an institution as a whole, look at the divorce rate in this country, like it's over 50%. So for me, I don't think that changes at all when it comes to whether it's a same sex or, a heterosexual marriage, because it's something as Americans that the way that we think, the way that we try to get ahead, our greed, our hunger for things, are the way we treat people, that includes our partners, whether it be same sex or not.
Right.
And I think that's really what it is what it comes down to, is the mentality as a whole, as a people, as Americans, the way we treat our partners, the way we see our spouses. I think that's what it is. I think gender and sexuality aside, really doesn't play the biggest role in our environment when it comes to that.
I agree. What do you think, guys? I mean, because she said something really profound, that it's not about gender and sexuality.
No, I think it's about the culture in general, because I believe that American culture, you fight things out. You don't talk about things.
Right.
So I think when situations come up, it's one person trying to overpower the other person to get their point across, to make their voice heard. Nobody's having conversations anymore, and everybody's resulted to that violence, even in their intimate relationships.
So that's why I was saying that it's something that's so insidious and embedded in our psyche of the culture that it almost feels like people don't understand the dynamics of a relationship unless someone is over the other person, as opposed to the philosophy. My husband, before we were married for like 21 years, and he used to say, you have to be equally yoked.
Yeah.
And what that means is that you have dialogue with somebody and you negotiate the way that something is going to play out, the way that you think. And it's not about you hitting somebody to make them do exactly what you want, or exerting physical violence on it. I think you're right. There's so many messages out here of the way that people deal with conflict. You see it in every aspect of every fiber of everything that we do, that people just don't seem to want to, one, walk away from something, two, have a stiff backbone and a strong upper lip to be able to take criticism and make it to do better. And three, the other piece is that, why is it that we feel like we have to use violence to get our point across?
I think the problem is people just want to be right. They don't want resolution. They don't want to solve a conflict. They do it because they want to be right. And when they can't be right, I mean, I guess that's one of those things that if somebody's going to abuse somebody, whether it's a same sex or heterosexual, that's something that they're going to do.
Right.
Other people, there's people that are never going to act out violently just because that's not their character.
Right.
People that do, regardless of the relationship, I feel like that's something they would do. And a lot of times people turn to violence or anger or whatever because they can't resolve conflict, or they don't care about resolving something. It's just a matter of, I'm right and this is what it is, and they're not interested in resolution.
I think that one point that I don't think people want to admit is that this all stems from your childhood. I believe that I don't think anyone just one day has a desire, oh, she's not listening to me, I'm gonna put my hands on her. I think there's so many other interferences that happen way before you get to the point where you're putting your hands on your intimate partner. You're growing up, maybe your mother's not listening to you, or your father's not listening to you, or if they tell you to do something and you don't do it, then they result to hitting you or whooping you, or whatever. I feel like that also plays a part into it, and what other oppressions that person may be facing. Because along with being in that relationship with an intimate partner, you're also facing the fact that half of society doesn't accept you for being bisexual or gay.
Right,
So that's one oppression.
Yeah.
Another oppression you can have is if you're a minority. That's another oppression. So now you have a double oppression. You're a gay, black, and then another oppression could be a woman.
Yeah.
You know, women aren't looked at as equal as men.
Yeah.
So that's a triple oppression that you have. So I think that sometimes there's other psychological interferences that happen that result in people acting out this way. And one of the
and not to interrupt you, but that's also probably a large reason why it's so unreported when it comes to bisexual men and women, because that was the highest statistic of, you know, people
Of
that
all
were
statistics,
abused.
yeah.
And that might be part of why it's so unreported, because of either shame, the fact that, you know, they're going to look at you like somehow it was your fault, or because it's same sex, like it's really equal. Guys,
or you deserve it.
Yeah, or you deserve it. Or y'all was just fighting.
Yeah,
y'all was just fighting. It was just a little cat fight.
Right. Whether it be because of sexuality or because of race. I mean, that's why a lot of times it's just shame, and
if it's two men or two women, it's sort of like levels the playing field. If you think about it, it's not the lesser of the sexes being, or the, you know, that kind of thing. You said something that sparked me, and I just had to add a fourth component to it. I had five. You talked about someone having a same-sex relationship, being a person of color, a minority, being a female. We forgot about the socioeconomics that play into it, people, because I believe that there's an impact of socioeconomic status that also could be seen as an oppression. Share with us some of the other things that you found out, because I believe that in here, that fourth statistic and a couple more that you found, it just blew me away. I think it's so important for this to come out.
Yep. So first off, with talking about the same sex, in 2012, fewer than 5% of survivors of LGBTQ intimate partner violence sought orders of protection. And furthermore, when we talk about the oppression of race, in the LGBTQ community, African American victims are more likely to experience physical intimate partner violence compared to those who didn't identify as African American. So Black people are more prone to being in a domestic violence relationship.
You mean people of color?
People of color in general.
Yeah, because again, I don't identify as Black or African American. I do identify as a female of color. So that's why I'm asking, because it is so inclusive. But you know what? As you said that, the whole big word, you know, word came up for me. Why? The consummate researcher is saying why. Anyway, carry on.
And then as for white victims in the LGBTQ community, they are more likely to experience sexual violence compared to those who do not identify as white.
Wow.
So you see in the people of color, you see where it's more physical. You know, they're hidden. And then in people who don't identify as African American, so white males, experience more of that sexual violence.
They say that you live out what's learned, and you brought it back to the point where you said that it's about your childhood. So if you grew up with corporal punishment as a child, which we know we grew up with corporal punishment, that belt, them switches, I mean, it's what you learn, but it's like the balance, because you can have the punishment, like you said, the physical punishment for when you get a little spanking, but it's tempered with love. It ain't like somebody bringing out trees and beating the hell out of you, you know, so.
Right.
Go ahead.
I mean, there's definitely a difference. I mean, I was spanked as a kid, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I think my mom had, like, you know, like a hidden supply of wooden spoons. That was her weapon of choice. Wooden spoons. But I think it's completely how it's done, and it's how you learn. Because for me, like my mother, when I was punished or spanked, it was not in the heat of the moment. It wasn't, I'm angry and I'm just smacking you because, you know what I mean? It wasn't a calm, let's talk about it. But it was, you know, a controlled, this is what it is. But
so you got that whooping where you was getting told while you were getting the whooping, when you was getting the whooping? We told you not to do that.
That's how it went down.
Yes, they be talking to you. You not go do it. No.
Yes.
Right.
Then I got the nerve to ask you questions. are you?
Like, and you gotta
I'm not gonna do it again.
and you better not crack too loud. I'm gonna hit you again.
Okay.
And I know you ain't gonna do it again. Is what they'll tell you. I know you ain't gonna
It's
do
when
it
you
again.
get that, like, when you get that, and you trying to stop crying, but you can't.
This off topic, but I got the best night sleep of my life after a good work day.
Oh, yeah. You try
The
real
only one
hard.
time that you had to work out.
Right.
Time, they ready to give them a shower.
Right? But the point is that when it's, learn from the parents, when it's a controlled, it doesn't have to be, well, I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to give you 3 spankings type of. But there's a difference of when you're in a fit of rage because you're mad at something and beating your kid.
Yeah.
Huge difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if that's what you experienced or saw as a child, you're more likely to, when you're angry, to.
That's exactly how you
When
gonna
I
act.
stop to fly
Yeah.
off the handle
Yeah.
and not think about what you do.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I just want to end with this one last statistic. Elle, you brought up socio-economic statuses and how that could be an oppression as well. The last statistic that I have for you guys, LGBTQ victims on public assistance are more likely to experience intimate partner violence compared to those who are not on public assistance.
Again, another question. You know what I'm going to say, the 3-letter word. Y'all say it with me.
Why? Yeah, why? And I personally believe sometimes finances are a reason that someone stays in these type of situations.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're on public assistance and maybe that person has a job. So you like, well, I'm not gonna leave because this is how I pay my rent, or this is how I'm able to provide for my children.
Yeah.
So compared to somebody who may be more independent and be like, okay, well, I can take care of myself. I don't need him. May be quicker to get out of that situation. Not saying that people who are not on public assistance don't encounter domestic violence relationships, but people who are on public assistance are more likely to experience that.
It's interesting because I was reading this book by Brene Brown. It's called Shame. I thought it was only me, something like that. And then it took me back when you were talking about the shame, and we were talking about the reason why only 5% of the people made police reports. Mm-hmm. It is shame. And I remember I had a professor, and I'm going to say her name right, Dr. Supriya Kunadaruparam. She was like, Dr. Supriya, she was like one of my favorite people, but she also did an ethnographic study where you sit back and you look at the way people act after they've been in these situations. And she, not only do you see things like this disparities based on someone's age might be a factor in it, those other things. You talk about culture, someone's religious beliefs can get in there, because you think about the things that we were fed when we were kids as girls growing up about how you stayed in it no matter what. So what type of message is that?
I've experienced that firsthand. My neighbor, March 22nd, 2017, went to go kill his wife at the bank because they were having marital issues and he wanted to bring another woman into the situation. It was just a whole thing, but they were a part of the Hmong culture. And in Hmong culture, a woman basically doesn't have any rights. And this is from what I was told about the situation directly from the victim. But, women in Hmong culture don't really have rights. The husband says what goes. So because she went against that, he retaliated in violence in that kind of way.
Wow. There are. I think we really do need to study a little bit more about human behavior, starting from ourselves too, because you're right, there are other things, cultural impacts. Because when we're talking about the honor killing, just thinking about that, because I remember watching an episode of Law and Order one time where it was perceived that it was violence or what have you, but it was a part of a ritual in their culture where if the woman violated something, she was punished, very strictly. So when we look at domestic violence, I think, thank you, Bess, for sharing those statistics, but I think that as and then we're going to have Allison share some other information, but I think that it's important that when we look at the lens of violence and abuse, there's so many ways for us to look at it, like you said, through the eyes of being a same-sex person or non-same-sex person, being a person of color, non-color, being female, being male, being poor, what's your religious background, what's your cultural, what's your financial background, it's all kind of things, your familial history around violence and even a psychological impact on you for how you're going to try to deal with something, because there's a lot enveloped in that. So what we're going to do now is Allie is going to take us through. This was a really touching kind of, it's a lot. Don't you feel it when you're talking? It's heavy.
Yes.
But Allison, you can start us on take us home with the statistics on violence and abuse, because when you hear these statistics, then you'll understand why it's a call to action for us all.
Yeah.
So 20% of victims have experienced some form of physical abuse. 16% of victims have experienced threats and intimidation. 15% have been verbally harassed. 4% of survivors have experienced sexual violence. And 11% of intimate violence cases reported in the NCA-DVP's 2015 report involved a weapon.
Wow. So Allie, tell us why it matters.
It matters because people that suffer in silence and go through these things, it's so unreported, it's so ignored. All these things very critically affect somebody's life. You know what I mean? And these are things that people are scared to come out and talk about.
I see you got 3 of the bullet points under that 11%. You want to share what's there, those last 3?
Yep. Domestic violence and abuse impacts everyone. Domestic abuse is increasing within same-sex relationships. Domestic violence and abuse perpetrated against men is also rising.
Can you take us on and tell us why it matters?
Domestic violence is not limited to heterosexual relationships and can affect individuals of all sexual orientations and genders.
Yeah.
Within the LGBTQ community, intimate partner violence occurs at a rate equal to or even higher than that of the heterosexual community. LGBTQ individuals may experience unique forms of intimate partner violence, as well as distinctive barriers to seeking help due to fear of discrimination or bias. Although the response to LGBTQ victims of domestic violence is gradually improving, the LGBTQ community is often met with ineffective and victimizing legal responses. 45% of victims do not report the violence they experience to police because they believe it will not help them. Furthermore, members of the LGBT community may be denied assistance in domestic violence services as a result of homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia.
So fear of homosexual relationships, transsexual or transgender, and bisexual. So all those phobias, that's a shame. The last thing that we just want to share before we wrap up here, and then Bess, I'll let you take us home with any final thoughts you have. Just want to share some other information. When you were talking, you alluded to some of the reasons why people don't come forward. In the research that I was reading, it showed that, yes, you're right, societal beliefs that domestic violence does not occur in LGBTQ relationships. That was one. Potential homophobia from the staff or the service providers, so even the practitioners. Lack of appropriate training for people who work in the LGBTQ community as service providers. They have lack of training. A fear that airing the problems among the LGBTQ population is going to take away from the progress toward equality or fuel anti-LGBTQ bias. And then they also say that domestic violence shelters are typically female only, and transgender individuals may not be allowed entrance due to their genital legal status. See, we didn't even think about the legal status or the genitalia at that point. You know, there's not a uniform bathroom, for people. They have the family bathrooms, but that would be the only place that somebody could go. But in the situations at the domestic places, at the violence shelters, they have designated bathrooms, and they have it on purpose because you don't want anything to happen to anybody. So you have to designate a woman's and a man's bathroom. So they don't have that benefit there. Dangers associated with outing oneself and risking rejection from family. friends in society, because you still know it's only been in the last maybe 15, 20 years since Sex in the City. I mean, literally, I saw Sex in the City be the catalyst to show when Sanford was introduced as a character. That's when I saw that they were saying it's okay. When I saw same-sex couple on House Hunters, then I knew that it was becoming more acceptable. And you think about how young those shows are. That's just me watching stuff. Lack of survivors being unaware of the LGBTQ friendly assistance resources and low levels of confidence in the effectiveness of the legal system for the LGBTQ people. So, what should we do? This last paragraph, tell people what they need to do.
So if you or someone you love is a victim of abuse, whether they're in a part of the LGBTQ community or a heterosexual relationship, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline to talk to someone and maybe even have get a referral to local services. If you have any questions about your legal rights as an LGBTQ victim or just a victim in general, please reach out to your local organization. And I do want to add something to that. So although October ends the end of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, that does not end domestic violence.
Yes.
So
well
please
said.
don't let it go out of your head after, as of November 1st starts a whole new awareness month.
Right.
It's something that's still continuing regardless of whether it has light shine on it or not. And if you know someone that's going through that, all you can do is be a support. And if you are someone that's going through that, we're here for you.
Yes.
There are
Send
people
us
that
a
are here to help
message.
you. Yes.
Text us in the chat.
Yes.
Email us at voicesrandomish@gmail.com.
Yes.
Go to our Facebook page. Let us know. You can do it in private. You can send us a message.
Right, and we can direct you to an
Resources.
organization that can help you, resources that can help you. But yeah, that's all I want to say. Know your resources
And just, if you see something that's not right, if you see that woman that comes in and she's got a black eye, instead of whispering to your coworker, hey, pull her aside and say, hey, are you okay? Do you need some help? Just offer. Let somebody know that you're there for them. That reach out. Just make sure they're okay, because sometimes when you're a victim, you won't always reach out. You're ashamed. You're scared. So just take care of other people.
Again, we just want to say thank you for joining us this month. We really appreciated having the opportunity to come with you with these topics, which we know they're not always pleasant to talk about. But again, the purpose of the Women of Randomish is always to engage, enlighten, inspire, uplift. And on that note, please do comment. We want to know what's your frequency.